Hey, thanks for joining us in the shed. Well, it's taken us a little while, but we've finally wrapped up our testing on 3 sets of 4-piston brakes. The Shimano XT 4-piston, the SRAM Code RSC, and the Hope E4 with the Tech 3 lever. We were testing all 3 sets of these brakes on our YT Jeffsy trail bike, which is a long-term test bike of ours that you might have seen some previous content on. All 3 brakes were tested with a 203mm rotor up front and a 180mm rotor out the back. Now let's clear one thing up straight away. This is by no means a scientific test. We don't have any graphs, temperature gauges or accelerometers. If you want that kind of stuff, go talk to some of the German magazines because they do a fantastic job of that. This is a qualitative test. What we liked about the brakes, what we didn't like, and our actual experience riding them on the trail. The way we rode these brakes was on our regular trail rides. By no means did we take them to alpine conditions. So I think it's fair to say that we didn't push any of these brakes to the absolute limits of their performance. Rather, the way that we rode these brakes reflects the way that most trail riders in Australia are going to experience them. So, without further ado, let's jump in and take a look at our first set of brakes, the SRAM Code RSC. Straight up, there have been some awful brakes from SRAM and Abbott in the past. Some really inconsistent and unreliable brakes, which only serves to highlight just how bloody good the new Code RSC really is. Now, the Code is SRAM's downhill brake, so it's a little bit out of place in some regards versus the Shimano XT 4-piston or the Hope E4, which are both targeting the enduro/trail rider crowd a little bit more. But it is surprisingly light, coming in at almost exactly the same weight as the Shimano XT 4-pistons, and we had just received it to test anyhow, so we thought, what the hell, let's include it in the comparison. Now, we're pleased to say that the Code RSCs were nothing short of excellent. Now, a few highlights with the SRAM Code RSC. We found these brakes very easy to set up. Obviously, they have a flip-flop lever design, which means you never need to swap the lines over if you want to run your rear brake with the left or your rear brake with the right lever. You can just reverse the levers. There's no problems at all. The moon washer system that these brakes use to help you align them is really sweet too. It's very similar to what you might have seen with the old V-brake pads, actually, using cup and moon washers to allow you to align them perfectly, and we never had any problems with these draggings. The swing link design too of the lever ensures that those brake pads come a long way back off the rotor when the brake isn't being applied, which made it even easier to set them up so there was never any inkling of drag. On the trail, it should be no surprise that the power of these brakes was excellent. They are a downhill brake after all, and in this trio of brakes we found them to have the most power when it comes to just sheer grunt. Construction wise, the way that they're put together is equally solid. There is a sealed bearing there on the lever blade, and there is no waggle or wobble in that lever at all. It all feels very solid underneath your finger. The adjustability is really good too. You've obviously got reach adjustment, but you've also got pad contact point adjustment, which all 3 of these brakes do, but the ease of adjustment on the Codes was really good. Previous versions of the Code and the guide brakes, we found this contact point adjustment to be pretty finicky and not really seem to do an awful lot, but on this latest iteration it seems to be really quite effective, and we had no problems getting these brakes feeling exactly how we wanted them in terms of reach and contact point. On the downsides with the Code RSC, we did find them to be the noisiest of this trio in the wet, and we also felt that the reach adjuster is pretty flimsy in comparison to the rest of the construction of the brake. It just feels a little bit finicky and doesn't feel nearly as nice as the way the rest of the brake is put together. We're also still not 100% sold on the ergonomics of the levers either. So overall, a great brake. That said, they are the most expensive brake on test. About $450 an end by the time you've factored in your rotors and adapters. The second set of brakes that we fitted to YT Jeffsy with the new Shimano XT 4-piston brakes. Now, anyone who remembers the original XT 4-piston brakes many moons ago will remember just how desirable they were. The original XT 4-pistons certainly weren't the first disc brake into the game, but they kind of revolutionized things when you had Shimano suddenly getting involved in disc brakes. It just signaled that rim brakes were goners. When it comes to Shimano brakes, they really do have a great reputation for fuss-free reliability, particularly at lower price points where they wipe the floor with the competition, to be honest. The XT 4-pistons look just like Shimano's Saint downhill brakes, and there are very few differences between them at all. The Saints do weigh a little bit more, there's a little bit more material around the caliper, and they also use a stainless steel fixing bolt through the middle of the caliper rather than a regular steel, but piston size, for instance, is identical and they use the same brake pads. Interestingly, the XT4 pistons use exactly the same brake lever as the current XT2 pistons, so you could always just buy the XT4 piston calipers and swap them out if that was something you wanted to do and get the benefits of the extra power without having to buy a new set of levers. The XT2 piston brake has kind of set the benchmark for a few years when it comes to performance as a trail brake. So how do the XT4 pistons stack up? So out on the trail, how do these things go? Well, these things in a nutshell are everything you love about the XT2 pistons, just with more power and better heat management. And that's saying something, because we've rarely had a problem with cooking XT brakes or found them to be underwhelming in the power department before. These brakes just have that classic Shimano ease of setup. Aligning them was no problems. Trimming down the brake lines, we didn't find we needed to re-bleed them, for instance. They just worked perfectly straight away. It was very fuss-free getting these brakes on and working perfectly. The power, it must be said, is excellent. Shimano claim it's 15 or 20% more powerful than the XT2 piston brakes. In our mind, it felt like a lot more than that. So yeah, a really good stopper. Not quite as grunty overall perhaps as the SRAMs, but more power than the Hopes, that's for sure. The feeling under your finger is nice and light and really fast and snappy, and that's classic Shimano. All of their brakes have that same nice and light lever action, and it's kind of a hallmark that we really enjoy. In terms of lowlights, well, there are a few little issues. We don't see the point of the free stroke adjuster on these brakes. It seems to do just about nothing. The pad contact point adjustment on the SRAMs and the Hopes is just so much more effective. Secondly, they are a bit noisy. We're not talking about braking noise, we're talking about the pads rattling in the caliper. The big pads with their large fin arrangement, which definitely does help in terms of reducing heat, means that there's a lot of mass in the pads and they do rattle around against the caliper and the rotor a little bit. You can get these brakes without the fin pads. You can put a non-finned pad in them. It reduces the heat management properties of the brake somewhat. All in all then, no real surprises from the Shimano XT4 piston brakes. They got that classic Shimano feel and reliability, and so if you're someone who likes the way that Shimano brakes perform, you're going to love the XT4 pistons. Definitely have a look. If you're the kind of person who prefers to buy an artisan sourdough loaf of bread rather than grabbing a loaf of tip-top off the shelf at Woolies, then you'll appreciate Hope's handmade in the UK approach. Grubby bearded Englishmen toiling away between CNC machines, having strong cups of tea and bacon buddies in their lunch break. That is the image that we have when it comes to Hope, and it is in stark contrast to the corporate image of SRAM and Shimano. The authenticity of that handmade vibe alone is enough to make plenty of people out there want to try Hope brakes over some of the more mainstream competitors. Add in the fact that you can get these brakes in a wide range of colours to suit your bike, and they also work really well, and you can suddenly see why these are such an appealing product. So, how do these little jewels go? Well, let's have a look at some of the highlights with these brakes, and we have to start with how they look. Take a squiz at these things. They are super glamorous. They look absolutely fantastic. You compare these things to the styling of the SRAMs or the Shimanos, and it's just a different league. If you're the sort of person who does appreciate some intricate CNC machine work and some anodizing, you're gonna love these things. Once we got these things onto the bike, we loved the feel of the adjusters. The reach adjusters and the contact point adjustment are big chunky metal knobs with really pronounced clicks. Just a nice solid feel about them. The way the power comes on with these brakes has a lot of control. There's certainly more modulation with these brakes than there is with either the Shimanos or with the SRAMs. So then, are there any downsides with the Hopes? Well, the initial bite and the overall power just isn't quite up there with the SRAMs or Shimano, so you do need to keep that in mind. They just don't have that same grunty stopping performance as the other two brakes on test. It also took a bit of time for these brakes to stop dragging completely, whereas the Shimanos and the SRAMs were running drag-free from the very first ride. It took a few rides before everything kind of settled down with the Hopes, and the pistons found their place in the caliper and were retracting the pads nice and clear of the rotor. Lastly, we're not sure whether it's just bad luck or bad aim on our part, but the rotors did seem to be a little bit more fragile with the Hopes than with the Shimanos or the SRAMs, and these were the only rotors that we found got themselves banged out of true and required a little bit of straightening over the course of the test. Overall though, the Hopes are a fantastic set of brakes. We love the way they look, we love the way that they feel under our finger as well, and we love the operation of the chunky adjusters too. And we're really surprised by the price. We genuinely thought these were going to be a super expensive offerings, as well as being the lightest by some margin too. Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been Flow Mountain Bike, and once again, please subscribe to this channel if you like what we do, and we'll see you out there.